Recording in progress. Thank you. Welcome once again. So we were talking about what we covered in the previous class. And in the previous class, we were talking about forecasting. And we were mentioning that if we do not forecast correctly, or if we don't have data to analyze, then sometimes we make decisions that are inappropriate or inadequate because we don't have anything to rely on. So any decision we make impacts our operations, and so we need to forecast correctly. For example, if a company knows beforehand that they will need a certain level of material or a certain level of products to keep up with demand, then they will make sure that they have the adequate inventory of the raw materials. They will make sure that they have the adequate capacity in terms of the personnel that will be required to manufacture that material or whatever product it is. And so by doing correct forecasting, the organization then is able to allocate resources accordingly, right? And so hence the reason why it's important then for us to understand the concepts of forecasting and what tools are available. If you may recall, the tools that we have, and we mentioned that we can break it into two broad areas. When we're trying to do forecasting, we said it can either be qualitative or it can be quantitative type of analysis. And in the qualitative type of analysis, we said there are different ways to gather information to be able to forecast and analyze. And one of them is, which is the easiest one, to do market research, right? Throw a survey out there, ask the consumer what it is that they want, what it is that they're looking for, if they would be willing to purchase a particular product or service, what price range they would be willing to purchase, or just general comments or concerns that they may have. So that type of research or collecting of data through surveys, you can analyze qualitatively, maybe do some type of categorization, find what is the most pressing issue that the customers have, and then start to look at, okay, maybe we can use that information to provide a particular product or service. So that's one way of forecasting, no? Or getting to know whether the customer would be willing to purchase our product. Another similar way, qualitatively, is to bring the salespeople together. We bring them together in a board meeting, and periodically analyze with them their regions that they're responsible for in terms of sales. And for the most part, salespeople are very optimistic, and they will tell you, yes, we will sell in our northern region, we'll sell an X amount of products, and people are willing to purchase it. And so it gives a very optimistic number in terms of forecasting. So you can do that, or you can get your top executives, top management to do those projections. Of course, they make the projections based on whatever information they are fed from people doing the research, market research, and so forth. So that's one way of doing forecasting. The second way, right, which is, I guess, a thing on where we basically paused last class, deals with numbers, right? And it's quantitative analysis. And in quantitative analysis, of course, we're trying to figure out, based on data that we have captured, how much we are going to need to produce, or how much demand will exist based on the previous sales. And so we saw different time series tools that are available as it relates to gathering the data or analyzing the data in time series. And we mentioned there can be different types of time series, no? It could be daily, it could be monthly, it could be weekly, quarterly, and so forth. And so we saw that the easiest way to do a forecast is to pretty much take the value of the previous period and say, well, that's exactly the same thing that we will sell in the coming or the period that you're trying to forecast. Do you remember how do you call that type of forecasting or that type of that approach? Anybody recalls? Just taking the exact same amount and just saying, well, this is what is the amount that we will project or that we project that we will sell this coming month. Not quite there, Lenny. Not quite there yet. That's one tool we will be looking at.
Is it the naive approach, sir? With time series methods?
Thank you, Janaya. It's the naive approach, right? And so basically just saying, well, it's the same thing. Pretty much that's what we will sell. So that's the easiest and straightforward way to forecast, right? If you sold 100 items last month, you say, well, this month we'll sell 100 items. That's naive approach, right? Or maybe last year in February, you sold 200 items. You say, well, this year in February, we'll sell 200 items. That's the naive approach. Thank you. And so that's one approach, but then we saw Lenny Joe was referring to the moving average, right? And so in the moving average, thank you, Lenny, we take a particular number of periods, right? Whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever time series you are using, and depending on the moving average that you want to calculate, and pretty much then you can use that to predict the next month. And we saw the formula of how to do the moving average. I think I was going to show you how you can get to that using Excel. So let me bring my Excel here. Now, let me pull up the question. Do you recall what question we were looking at from the textbook? Pull it here. Was 4.2b, right? And so the table pretty much had number of years and it had demand being 7, 9, 5, 9, 13, 8, 12, 13, 9, 11, and 7, right? And the number of years, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Okay, all the way to 12, to 11, sorry. And so the question pretty much was asking, starting at year 4, which is this period here, we wanted to calculate the moving average. We wanted to forecast demand for the previous year. And so we said, well, the easiest formula, or the formula we already know, is to take the average of the previous 3 months.
Are you sharing your screen again?
Oh, sorry. I was. Thank you. Let me go back and start that over. So we said we have the year. Are you guys seeing my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have the.
Can you zoom in on it, sir?
Yes, I can zoom in.
Yes, I can zoom in.
Yeah, no, yes.
Okay, very good. So we have 1, 2, 3 all the way to 11. Then we had the demand was 7, 9, 5, 9, 13, 8, 12, 13, 9, 11, and 7. Okay, so we're asking to begin on year 4, right? starting on this year, what is the forecast, okay, for the remainder of the months. So we said, well, moving average, pretty much it's the average of the previous 3 months, right? And that is going to be our value here. And we say, well, it follows the same thing, okay? We notice by just copying the formula to the week 5, then we have year 2, 3, and 4. We're getting the average. And so pretty much we move along the way and we get our moving average. Right? So that's one way to do it. Okay. You notice our moving average here, okay? Or the average is taking the previous three periods. Okay. Now I said there's another way to do this, okay? And it involves taking advantage of a tool or a plugin that you have in Excel. So in the data tab, okay, you would have under the analysis, in the analysis group, you should have this data analysis tool. If you have your Excel open, let me know if you have it. If you do not have it, I can show you how to get it. Okay, and how to make sure it's installed on your Excel. But it would be in the ribbon, you have these home, research, page layout, formulas, data. So click on data and find all the way to the right, the analysis group, and you would have the data analysis tool there. So if we click on the data analysis tool, you notice it has several analysis tools for different things to do. And one of them is the moving average, okay? So if you click on the moving average, you can click OK. It asks you for the input range, which is pretty much the data we're trying to use. Press enter, and it asks you what's the interval. So because we're using every 3 months, that is going to be our interval there. And we can select the output range. And let's output on the second year here. Press enter. And you press OK. And you notice it gives you pretty much the same formula I have here, average. It gives you that same information here. And it populates the tables for you, okay? Plotting it there. And so now you're able to use that and plot that diagram to forecast different information, no, in terms of demand there. Any questions here? Any questions on that?
You put in a formula, sir?
In the first instance, I did put a formula. In the second one, I pretty much used the data analysis tool, moving average, and it automatically puts the formula for you. Okay? Which is what I showed just now.
Okay, can I see the formula? Can you zoom in, please?
Yes. Let me see if we can zoom in the formula here. I'm not able to, can you see there? That's pretty much the formula. It says average.
Okay, okay.
That's the average formula. There are different ways to do it. Average is straightforward, right? It gives you the average of those 3 numbers, or whatever number you decide. Okay, so that's another way of doing the forecasting, right? Now, another way is to do what's called a weighted moving average, okay? And in doing a weighted moving average, what you're trying to do then is to assign a weight to each of the periods you're using to do your forecast. And so basically we could have said, well, let's give to this particular, or the period closest to what we're trying to predict, give that a weight of 0.5, for example, right? So we can say, well, we're going to give this a weight of 0.5, we're going to give this a weight of 0.3, and this other one a weight of 0.2. And so pretty much it involves taking the sum, right? Or the average, I should say, or of each of these weighted demands from the previous period. So we would have to do something like this. Let me show you. So we would have to do like 5 times 0.5. That would give us 2.5. If I bring this formula here, it gives us 1.4, 2.7, 2.5. Okay. That is the weighted average there. Okay. And then we have to divide by the sum of the weights. Okay. Which in this case, it's 1. Right. So if we do these, then we would get then a weighted average, okay, or a weighted moving average, that is, okay, where we're adding that sum of the weight times the demand, okay, and we divide by the sum of the weights, which should be divided by 1, right? So pretty much the average of these, okay, which would be the 2.2, okay, which of course we would then continue to do the same analysis for everybody else in that sense, okay? So that's another way to do it, weighted moving average, to take the actual demand in the period that we're trying to do, and we use the weights to calculate. Now, once we have estimated a demand, okay, then of course we have to pretty much make an analysis whether the actual data, right, and then this comes back to the control factor, no, where you're trying to see whether you forecasted correctly. As you make your considerations in future forecasts, maybe you had some issue during that forecast, and so you go back and review your formulas. Maybe the weights that you had assigned are not appropriate, and you go back and you modify those weights, okay? That example. And so you're pretty much trying to, every time you do a forecast, go back and see what your forecast was, what's the actual demand that you had, and then try to find where are your errors, okay? And then you fix it from there, okay? Now, another type of forecast that we did not see, okay, is called regression analysis. And we will not go deeply in regression analysis, as it entails some statistical formulas. Again, not particularly interested for this class, as this is just an introduction to operations management, but just for you to know, pretty much it's looking at trends, okay, projecting trends of data. And so pretty much you would be able to plot the different demands, like this demand, if you plot them in a scatter diagram. Let me see if we can plot this in a scatter diagram here, okay? So it would show, in this case, something like this, okay? Where you notice the demand is, for each of the periods, it's kind of exponential, no, going in a curve. And so you can, in this case, for example, put a trend line, which would be this trend line. And so what we're trying to do with regression analysis is trying to see, okay, this particular trend, what is the mathematical formula to do that trend, right? And so you can, in Excel, be able to find the intercept, okay, sorry, the equation on the chart here, the equation, okay? And pretty much this equation tells us that there is, all right, an intercept, there is a coefficient here that we're going to use. And so if we project let's say for the following demands, right? In the case of the next year was 9, we'll pretty much replace the X with that value, and then we'll be able to get what the value of Y would be in that case, right? Now you can follow this trend line, okay? If we format the trend line, you can follow it using moving average, which is basically this, right? That's what we got here. That's the moving average here, okay? But we're using a linear, okay? And we can say, well, let's go forward 5 periods, okay? And so pretty much based on that trend line, these would, or that would be the general line or projection, the trend of our data, okay? Again, you're not going to be tasked with knowing the calculations and stuff like that for regression analysis. Okay, I hope everything was clear in that regard. Any questions? May quickly close that. Any questions before we start today's session? Anybody has any questions, any concern, anything you'd want me to repeat?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's then dive into today's topic, okay? And everything we have covered so far has been introduction to operations management. So the project management session, the session on forecasting, and the previous sessions, pretty much looking at the global economy, are pretty much just introduction to operations management. And we had mentioned in the previous sessions that operations managers need to make certain strategic decisions, right, that relate to operations management. And one of such decisions is the decision of designing goods and services, right? Choosing which goods and services they will develop, right? They will produce and they will introduce to the market. And so it's important then for organizations to look at that, because that's the general purpose of any organization. If you think about it carefully, right? Any organization that is trying to sell a product or service, they're looking at what they can do for society. That is embedded in their mission statement. How will they impact society with a product or a service, right? And so organizations have a focus, right? Organizations need to concentrate on something that they are good at, and then they introduce that. Now, here's an example of a product or a company, right? What do you think is the core competency of Honda? Have you heard that brand, Honda? You've probably seen their vehicles, you've probably seen motorcycles, you've seen lawnmowers, generators, marine motors, right? What is it that Honda has that gives them a core competence? What are they good at? What is their focus? Is it on building the vehicles? Is it on building the motorcycles? Is it in manufacturing generators, lawnmowers, weed eaters? Or what is it that do you think is their core competence? What do they focus on? Anybody?
For me, I would say building engines or motors.
Very good, Harry.
engine?
Yes. Indeed, indeed. If you notice, there are other brands, right, that carry the Honda engines, right? And so they have, and they focus on that aspect of the technology. You know, they know how to do that. That's what they're good at, and they focus on that, right? Now, think about this other company, Intel. You've probably seen that sticker on your computer, whether it's your personal computer or your work computer. What is Intel? What's Intel's focus? Anyone? Is it in building the computer? Or building technology?
Processors.
Yes, Romal, processors, right? So they are in the business of building microprocessors, right? And manufacturing chips, electronic chips for computers, right? Whether it's a personal computer, whether it's a mainframe or a server, you would see Intel microprocessors in them for the most part. Of course, there are other competitors, but we're concentrating on Intel for this example. And so that's their main focus. That is something that they're good at, or their competence, right? So the reason why we are looking at these examples is because any organization, doesn't matter what product or service you're producing or delivering, you have to concentrate on something that you're good at, right? You have to make sure that it follows your mission, your values, and in doing that, then you will be able to design products and services that will meet the demand of the customers. They will be able to provide value to the consumer, which is basically what everybody is looking for, right? Whenever you purchase anything, you want that to have value, right? You want your engine to last for a lifetime sometimes, right? So for today's class, we'll be defining what a product is. We'll be looking at documents that are used in production. We'll be looking at how businesses and organizations can decide to produce a product or service. What are some of the things that we need to take into consideration, especially when analyzing whether there's an opportunity to make a product or to produce a product, right? We'll look at the product development life cycle, okay, or the product life cycle, and the importance then to continue towards that path, right? Towards building products that will last, okay? Again, the reason why it's very important to look at these things is because if a firm doesn't continue in developing products or services, then they end up being in a position where they may lose revenue, potential revenue from new products. Because the reality is that the majority of the leaders in any industry, the majority of the leaders are those that are continuously producing or introducing new products. And the majority of their sales come from new products. I'll give you an example. By a show of hands, who here has either a Samsung or an iPhone, an Apple phone? Just raise your hand. And let me try to see if I can see how many hands were raised. Now, just anyone of you who raise your hand, why is it that you have these type of phones?
I have an iPhone because of the camera.
Because of the camera. Okay, Janaya. Now, would you say, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Leanne, then we can.
No, I was just saying that I was gonna say the same thing as Janaya for the camera quality.
The camera quality, very good. Anybody else?
I have a Samsung. For me, Samsungs are reliable and user friendly. Not that complicated. So.
Excellent.
Sir, I have an iPhone and I would say I have it because it moves better than a Samsung. Sorry, previous person. Samsung just moves slow in my opinion.
Okay. It depends on the specifications of the phones, but yes. There are different sentiments towards either or, right? But let me ask you a question. How old is your phone? By raise of hands, do you have a phone that's older than 5 years? I don't see the hands going up. It means you have the most recent, right? Or at least fairly recent versions of the iPhone or Samsung phone, right? Because a 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old, or let's go even farther, 6 or 7-year-old, maybe the third, fourth generation of iPhones, they don't have the camera that you have on your current iPhone, right? So you see then that for the consumer, right? Because the consumer needs are constantly changing, right? Consumer needs are constantly changing and new innovations, new technologies exist. Then if a company, let's say like Samsung or Amazon, were to stay behind, right? And they don't incorporate these new features, they don't bring new technology in their devices and they introduce to the market, then they will eventually become obsolete, right? In the realm of telecommunications and mobile phones, have you guys heard about BlackBerry? Have you heard
I
about
have.
Nokia?
Yes,
Back
sir.
in the day, if somebody had a BlackBerry, you know, they
Yeah,
were
and the rich.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, those were I mean, BlackBerry was really, really top of its class, right? In terms of what it could do. But it failed, right? It failed to continue in the direction where everybody else was going, right? And so iPhone brought the experience, everything is tactile, right? You can install additional applications. And so BlackBerry started to stay behind, right? Or Nokia, for example, right? Nokia wanted to compete as well, but they partnered with Microsoft, and so you could only install Microsoft's operating system or the mobile version of Microsoft in the Nokia phones. But eventually, you don't see them as much, right? I don't recall seeing any Nokia recently, right? Those type of phones. So pretty much the dominance, of course, in the market or in that industry would be the iPhones and the Samsungs, right? Which, by the show of hands that I saw in class, the majority are using that. Of course, you have the Redmis from China and the other brands that are coming from China, right? Which are starting to take a lot of the market or some of the market in this side of the world. But pretty much iPhone and Samsung have the majority of the market. Now, the point I wanted to make here is that hence the importance for organizations to constantly be introducing new products, okay? Constantly. It's important for organizations to do that. If not, they will end up staying behind. And so this diagram, okay, in the slides that you will have access to afterwards, pretty much shows that, okay, that the higher the percentage of sales from the previous 5 years, that it's more likely that the firm is to be a leader, okay? Because their sales, right, are higher in products that were recently introduced, newer products, okay? it's like what we see with iPhones, right? Their products, their highest sales are on those products or recent products that they introduced, right? And so touching a little bit on the aspect of that we were talking in the previous class of forecasting. One way that they can forecast their demand is by just when they publish their announcement that they're soon going to do a new release, they have a lot of people, consumers signing up to get the latest updates of that release. And so they start to see the interest of people in their product, right? In their what they are going to release pretty much soon. Marceli, I see your hand raised. Is it from the previous exercise?
Yes, sir, from the previous, sorry. But I was just taking note of what you were saying in regards to phones. I think in regards to like PlayStations and Xboxes, those as well, they keep advancing, every other couple months, years, you hear there's an upgrade to a PlayStation, to an Xbox. So when it comes to technology on a whole, there's always an advancement.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks for bringing that up, Marcelo. As a matter of fact, previously it was that when it comes to computers, that the general life cycle is 3 years. No, computer. If there's 3 years, that's obsolete. Newer technology exists, right? That has been changing to every year, right? Every year, new technology comes in. Now, when it comes to computing, it actually getting shorter even. Every 6 months, you see new technology coming in, new microprocessors and so forth. And so the consumer market is always looking at what's new, right? What's out there. So if companies stay behind and they don't follow, right, what is being dictated by the market, then they can end up in trouble. And so for the purposes of our discussion tonight, okay, a decision that needs to be made is how are we going to create a product, right, that meets the demand of the consumer, that meets the demand of the market, right? So we need to make this decision, right, of, okay, selecting what product we want to do, okay, what product we want to introduce to the market, defining this product, and most importantly, the topic of our consideration tonight is designing the product that will meet the demand of the marketplace, what the customer wants, right? And so we are going to see a couple tools that will allow us to evaluate what the customer wants, and based on their wants, then how can we meet those wants, right? How can we apply what we know, what we are good at, right? In the case of Honda, for example, their engines, people want reliability in whatever product they have. So they need to have a good engine, right? You don't want to purchase a weed eater or a lawnmower that 6 months time, it will pretty much you'll have to replace and get a new one, right? No, you want something that will be reliable, that you will be able to work with it in any condition, and it will continue working for years and years, of course, with appropriate care and so forth, right? So that's what people want, right? And similarly, right? And so that's what we need to take into consideration here, right? What would be the decision, right? And of course, it's talking about strategy. You guys recall the 3 main strategies that any business can choose to use in their general business aspect? We mentioned 3 strategies. I think some of the questions were related to business strategy as well. Florinda, do you remember one of them?
Sir, this is
Is
the,
it the planning, scheduling, organizing? I think it is.
Okay, thank you, Florina. Not quite the planning stage. That's just the one of the or the operation project management aspects, no? But we're talking
Is
about overall business strategy.
Oh, it's of the marketing, we think.
is one of them differentiation?
Yes, thank you, Anasi. Yes, so we're basically looking at, okay, how does the company wish to operate in the market, right? That's basically the strategy. Remember, strategy, we're talking about a plan, right? They already have their mission, they already know what they want to do or how they're going to benefit society, but now they need to have a strategy, right? And so there are three distinct strategies, unless you mentioned differentiation being one, right? Is it coming out of your mind, Lorinda, or anybody else?
The second one is cost leadership and the third one is response.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed. So in deciding your strategy then, right, or knowing how you want to compete, then you can make the decision or determination of what product you're going to introduce, right? So in the case of differentiation, let's go back to that meaning, right? What will set you apart from your competition? And so you're going to think about products and services, right, that will set you apart, right? Something that will differentiate you from everybody else. So that is also a product strategy that you can follow based on your general strategy, okay? If your general strategy is cost leadership, right? So you will try to develop products that have that into consideration, right? That are good quality products, but maybe in the processes, maybe in a capacity or capability that you have, right? Or a strength that you have that will allow you to minimize the cost of production. And so you can have cost leadership strategy and your products will be based on that strategy, right? You can have that product strategy as well. Or maybe it can be that you have similar type of ingredients, right? Or similar type of components. And so because you have similar type of components, then assembly is faster and you're able to take advantage of that, minimize costs associated with production. And so you take advantage of cost leadership in that regard. Or it can be the other one that you mentioned, right? That's response. Whatever the market dictates, whatever customers want, whatever the demand is there for, then you are able to capitalize, and because you already have the processes in place and your competence is in coming to the market as fast as you can, right? You're able to react quickly, produce a product or deliver a service as quickly as you can, right? And so taking advantage of your competitive advantage, right? What makes you different, what you're good at better than other competitors, then you can pretty much bring this or make this decision and bring it forward. Now, here's a quick example of one of the things that can happen, right? If we are looking at the core competence and trying to deliver, right, in time, trying to deliver products, right, that will be able to react to the market quickly, okay, or that you have some improvement, right, in the engineering phase of the design of the product, right, and because you make those major decisions, then those impact operations. In this case, we see the Tesla and the Tesla Model 3 and Tesla Model Y. Okay. Let me get my laser pointer here. Okay. So the undercarriage here, you notice for the Tesla 3, it involves 70 pieces of metal. Now think of how that impacts operation. You have 70 pieces of metal that need to be assembled together to create this underbody for this vehicle, right? Any implications of what you know so far that relate to operations management of assembling these 70 components for this vehicle? Any implication there for operations and production that you can think about? Or supply chain considerations?
Sir, I'm thinking you're gonna need more manpower.
Right, right. So manpower, definitely, right? You need additional people to maybe the amount of time, right, that it will take. So you're using a lot of resources there, right? How about keeping stock of all these parts, right? So it has an impact on inventory levels, right? And monitoring of inventory, right? Now, what modification or change happened here? Well, Tesla redesigned what they had. And so now with the Model Y, the underbody has only two parts, pretty much the left side and the right side, and pretty much just those two parts, and you combine, right? Now you can see then by doing this type of redesigning or changes to their design, how that then can impact operations significantly, right? You were mentioning earlier, right? This one, the amount of people that would require maybe to assemble it, right? And the expertise that will be needed. Well, here, by reducing the number of parts, then you can improve in that regard. You can improve in your warehousing processes. You can improve in the time it takes to assemble, right? And so because it takes less time to assemble, then you can produce more vehicles, right? So there are these implications to that, right? And of course, if they think about it even further, they even will simplify it further to make it faster, right? Any questions thus far? Anyone? No. Why then is it important for businesses, again, coming back to the same topic that we were mentioning earlier, to introduce new products? Well, it has to do with the product life cycle, okay? Pretty much products are born, right? They have a growth phase, maturity phase, and they eventually die, right? And so here you notice in this diagram, this figure, we see that based on sales, if we notice this black line here, okay, when the product is first introduced, and so there's the introduction phase, that's the first phase of the product life cycle. That's when companies are doing research, they're involved in product development, they're looking at maybe they can modify anything in their processes, right? They're making sure that their suppliers are able to supply the raw materials that they need. And so they have in this phase, the introductory phase, oops, sorry, let me go back, right? They pretty much are not selling much, right? At the beginning, you don't have any sales, but they have all these expensive. And that's why you notice there is a loss here, okay? This side, can you see my cursor? Yes, okay. There's a pretty much a loss, this gray area here, because the cost of development and production at that stage is pretty much high, right? The sales are low, but then sales start to increase during the growth stage, right? Or the growth phase. And so in this growth stage, that's where you need to start to go back to the forecasting models that you have and make sure that, okay, as you forecast the number of sales to be increasing, then you start to add more capacity, right? You start to estimate that, okay, people will be needing more of this product or service, and you need more people, so you start to introduce that, okay? Eventually, right, once we are in the third phase, maturity, then that's where most of the revenue is and profit is being received from this particular product, because you're producing more, right? You're selling more, so have more revenue, and the cost of production begins to go lower, right? The more you produce in a particular production period, then of course the cost of production per unit goes down, so you're making more profit then. It's at this stage, maturity stage, that then you have other competitors looking at your growth and they seeing that, oh, this is a viable market, and so they start to introduce also new products similar to yours, maybe copying yours, right? And so at this stage, because you have this, they need to continue innovate with that product, okay? Eventually it will reach to the decline phase, right? And of course, sales start to drop, and then costs, of course, it starts to go up a little bit also, right? And so in this phase of decline phase, if the companies realize that, okay, we're starting to see a decrease in sales here, right? And it's pretty much getting closer to our cost. Eventually, we will have a loss, right? Now, there's something in marketing, if you may recall, right? It's called the 80-20 rule. Everybody heard about the 80-20 rule? Sydney, have you heard about that?
Hi, sir. Yes, I have. Isn't it like where you, I've never heard it in like this sense, but is it like where you give more than what you're actually getting back?
Oh, okay, that's an
That's
interesting.
my study. That's where I got it from also.
No, thank you. There are different applications to that, no, but okay, I hadn't heard about that one particularly, but okay, anybody else? Thank you, Sydney. 80-20 rule, right? Lillian? And then I'll go to Romal. I see you have your hand up.
Repeat this question, sir.
Yeah, I was just asking if you have heard about the 80-20 rule
Oh,
in
no,
market.
sir. I thought it was based on the product life because I had just actually covered that over with my third farmers.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
So I don't remember clearly, sir, but it's something along the lines of 80% of the revenue or profit accounts for 20% of the customers or something like that.
Thank you. Yes, Romal, indeed. So pretty much, right? If this particular product that we're analyzing here, right, in this particular life cycle, if that product is one of those products that is generating 80% of revenue, right, then that means it's a product that should continue to be in your portfolio, right? But if the product is not providing too much revenue to the company, then it's really not making any significant impact in revenue, so it can be dropped, right? So it's precisely what Romal was saying, no? Leani, let me hear you. You have your hand raised.
Sir, I'm sorry, that must be from a long time.
Oh, okay. Shante, I see your hand raised as well.
Oh, no, sir.
Oh,
I think
okay,
it
okay,
was,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, no problem. Okay, yes, so then it's important, right? In following that 80-20, right? That organizations make that determination and look at their portfolio of products and look at how much contribution they're making to the revenue, right? Total revenue of the firm. And if the product is not contributing significantly, then they can start to make decisions and determinations. Well, maybe this product isn't making sense for us to continue to producing, right? And that's why you see then that companies start to phase out products, right? And then they introduce new products because they want to maintain their revenues, right? And hence the reason why we're talking about, okay, increasing revenue by introducing new products, looking at what they're contributing to the overall objectives of the organization, right? Yes, Marcelo?
So I'm thinking about this product life cycle like in a service type of business because with the loss, I think you would consider that like the training of a new employee, because you're not really reaping any benefits from them being trained as yet. And then as they progress, they start learning the business, then that's when they can actually apply what you've trained them to do. And then when it goes back to the decline is, hey, you know what? I know everything that I know now. So maybe it's time for me to move on. Maybe I can get a better offer somewhere. So that's how I am applying it into like a service type of business.
Yes, indeed, I like the line of thought there, Marcelo, because it has to do a lot with utility, no? If you follow your economic terms, no, the terms of utility, it's at some point that you see, well, there's no, you don't feel any, or you're not getting any utility, right? Or you're not seeing the value, right? And so, hence the reason, right, why organizations want to always encourage professional development, right, for their employees, for them to make sure that they are contributing, right, and they are growing, right? Shante, I see your hand up again, or was it from the previous session?
No, sir, let me put it down. I'm not sure why it's up.
Okay, okay, okay. I already put it on for you. So, okay, thank you. Yes. So I like that line of thought, Marcelo, and indeed, know what we're talking about. Services, right? Some services are pure services, right? So we can differentiate from product and services. Products are tangible, you can hold, feel, touch, and so forth. While services, they're not tangible. However, they are, some services are considered products. Think of, for example, when Galen introduces a new course or a new program, that's their product, right? The program itself or the courses. If you purchase, for example, software from Microsoft, right? You're purchasing, for example, the Office application as a product. That's the Office product or Microsoft product, right? And so services are also products, right? So we can start to see that it does apply in all aspects, not only the production of tangible products, right, or goods, but also services. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break if you want to stretch your legs, stand up a little bit, and then we can continue our discussion and talking about what things we can take into consideration when introducing new products or services. Is that okay? Let me get my timer here. Okay, so it's 9:11. We will reconvene at 9:15 if that's okay with you guys.
Yes, sir. I'm good.
Okay, class, it's 9:15. Let's resume our session. Okay, so what considerations can we make in determining whether we're going to introduce a new product? What things we can look at? Well, the first thing is understanding the customer, the consumer, right? What it is that the customer is looking for. And then we can start to look at what products or services we can offer. Let's take an example. In the past, when you wanted to watch a movie with your family, you would go to those rentals and they would have some VHS tapes, video cassette tapes. Some of you may not know what I'm talking about, but you pretty much borrow a videotape, you bring it home, put it in your video cassette player, and then you watch your movie, then you go back, take it back, right? that was eventually replaced with newer technology, of course. Of course, the customer still wants to access or watch movies, and so they introduced DVDs, Blu-rays eventually, right? And so you were able to use these medium. Now, things have changed, right? How do people now access entertainment nowadays? How do people access entertainment? Are they looking for these DVD places or something?
Internet?
Yes, through internet, right?
Through applications like
Yes,
Netflix, Movie
yes,
Box Pro.
right. So pretty much on your cell phone, right? You want to stream something, so you're looking for streaming services, and it's on the go, right? Wherever you are, you can access your entertainment. You would want to do that, you can do that, right? So, the customer needs pretty much the same. However, the customer, we call it not needs, but the behavior has changed in a sense, right? Where you want it on demand, you want it wherever, however, right? Um, Convenient to you. Yes, Marceli, you have a thumbs up or a hand raised hand?
Oh, sir, I'm just thinking about the big back TVs as well. First, the TVs, where they were black and white, and then they slowly started coming into color, but then they were still big back TVs, and then we started with the flat screens, and well, now, well, yes, the flat screens are bigger, but they're much thinner than they were before.
Right, right. So the reason why then these consumer electronic companies look at what the customer wants, right? They try to understand the consumer, and so they say, well, customer wants a big TV, but they want it to look as a piece of art in your living room, and so they'll have these nice flat screens that don't take much of space, right? So that's one way. The other consideration that can be made is any economic change, right? Maybe look at the economy, right? I like to think that nowadays educated young people are able to get employment, although it's not the most favorable, right? But people can access employment through the BPO sector, for example. There are different economies. We have the blue economy, orange economy, green economy, all type of economy now. And so that has an impact, right, on what the market can dictate in terms of, okay, because people are now able to contribute more to their households, there's the per capita income is maybe higher, right? And so because of that change in the economy, then there's a possibility of firms looking at, oh, we can introduce a new service, we can introduce a new product, right? Hence the reason why you see that the cable companies that provide internet service, smart, digital, all those, right? Looking at those changes in the economy, they start to introduce packages that are specifically for people who are working from home, working remotely, or, right, because of that change, right, then you are probably seeing more professionals entering and trying to get their MBAs, for example, right? Even though there may be some, like the pandemic, for example, there was an impact in most of the industries, but the education sector really continued to develop, right? Because people wanted to pursue higher education, right? So those can be some of the considerations, right? Or it can be sociological and demographic change, right? Recently, right, has been, I think it's a phenomenon worldwide, right? Now, not to disrespect young people, but most young couples, or some young couples, I should say, not most, some, right? And this apparently seems to be worldwide, right? Tend to have a sociological change that instead of having actual babies, right, children, they would have their puppies or their kitten as their, and treat them as children, right? And so that is probably a change. And so products in that line, you see businesses producing more pet care supplies, pet care stuff like that. So instead of maybe pushing a prom with a child, you would see them pushing a prom with a puppy in there, right? So those are some changes, right? And of course, as you notice, because of that, many societies have older folks, and then you don't have many younger folks participating in the economy, right? So there's a lot of demographic changes there. And based on those, then you can start to think, okay, maybe it's time for the organization, the company to introduce a new product, right? Or it can be that technology changes, right? And we spoke about technology changes as it relates to, for example, the introduction of smartphones, right? And why iPhone and Samsung had that acceptance, and then why the others stayed behind, because they didn't take into consideration the new advancements in technology, right? Or it can be political and legal changes. Maybe eventually here there are special agreements between Belize and other parts of the world, and so you see that because of those agreements, tariffs are lowered, and so you can import products from those places, or maybe it opens the market for Belizeans to export or produce products and export to those countries. So those are also other requirements or considerations that we can take into thought when thinking about generating new products, right? Or it could be other type of changes that affect how things are done or handled in the market, you know, different professional standards, suppliers, and distributors. Okay, so as operations managers, we have to make sure we understand all these different scenarios of different things, factors that are at play, and how we can take advantage of that to produce a product or to develop a service. So when it comes to the development of products and services, I kind of zoomed this image a little bit, okay? It starts following a waterfall methodology, if you will, okay? In project management, there are two distinct methodologies, or actually there are several methodologies, but we can mention the waterfall methodology, where it cascades from one step to the next, right? And it continues cascading downward. So we have the concept, right? What is the idea that we have, okay? And so we're trying to basically look at that idea, that concept that comes from different sources. It can come from the market research that we have, from the R&D department, right? Or research and development department, or from anyone in the organization. And once that concept or that idea is conceptualized, you have to do feasibility analysis, make sure it's something that is cost effective, that the market will accept it, that that we have the capability to do it, right? That type of feasibility analysis, right? Can we then take that idea that we have, and do we have the capacity and the capability? Do we have the personnel that will be able to develop it? Can they do it, right? Do we have that ability? Then that's the feasibility analysis. Then looking at the scope of the product development team, right? They look at what the customer wants, right? What are the requirements for the customer to accept this product and for us to win the customer? Because the customer will look at different products, they will look at different competition right? Or the competitors' products, and then we need to understand what they require to purchase the product, right? Or what it is, what functionality or feature is required that we need to have, right? And based on that information, right, then we start to work on the actual functionality of the product, right? How will the product work, right? And so we're looking at now the designers, the engineers looking at doing their job in now taking what the customer requires, putting together prototypes, and developing the product, right? Its functions, doing design reviews, testing it out to make sure it meets the customer expectations, right? And eventually, right? Eventually it's introduced to the market. All that training exercise is done, the promotion and so forth, and delivering to the customer through various channels, right? And of course, going back and evaluating whether the entire design was a success, right? And this development stages, right? Product development stages happens for every product that is going to be introduced, right? So we're trying to determine whether it's going to be cost effective for the organization, right? But not just necessarily whether it's going to be cost effective or whether it's going to be profitable, but most importantly, if you notice, the majority of the involvement here is from who? You notice this orange line? The majority of the involvement is from design and engineering, right? And so if you have a product that, I mean, the idea is excellent, right? It's a good concept. It's feasible. It's going to generate a lot of profits. But if it's going to be too complicated to produce or very difficult to produce, then that may not be a good idea for the organization to pursue it, right? Because it will cost them more in terms of manufacturing and stuff like that. Make sense? Thank you, Marceli. Okay, so we have a tool that we can use then to develop, right? And basically take what the customer wants, right? And to look at whether we are able to meet those wants, right? And we have the capability or the capacity to deliver what the customer wants, right? And so it's called the quality function deployment house of quality, okay? And so pretty much it's drawing a wooden a stick house, if you will, right? But then there are different parts to this house of quality. And so it's one of those tools when it comes to quality function deployment that we can use. It's pretty much a graph using different matrices that we're able to map what the customer wants with what we can provide, and then putting some frequencies there in terms of ratings. We're able to see, okay, what it is that we need to concentrate, because we also look at what the competition is providing, right? If they're able to meet with their own products what the customer wants, okay? So we're trying to, of course, satisfy the customer needs in this case, right? So it involves pretty much these 7 steps, okay, to build the QFD house of quality, okay? And the first one is to identify what the customer wants or what they want in the product that we're trying to produce, okay? Then the second step is to identify specific characteristics, specific features, right, or attributes, right, that we can incorporate in a product that will meet the customer wants, right? So pretty much how are we going to satisfy the customer wants, right? The third step is then matching, right? In building a matrix, we can match their wants with these house, with these characteristics, right? And then the fourth step is then identifying any relationship between the house, right? So how do they relate with one another, right? We can look at that as well. The fifth step is to develop an importance rating, okay? Now, based on what the customer has specified to be their most preferred option, right, of what they want, then we develop a rating based on the needs that we want to meet, that they have, and how we can accomplish that or meet their needs, okay? And then sixth, we evaluate the competing products. Again, we look at what the customer wants, and we try to evaluate whether the competition is able to provide that fairly, poorly, or whether they're good at providing that or meeting that need that the customer has. And seventh, determining the desirable technical attributes, right? So we're basically comparing what we're going to be producing, what the customer has, and then doing that comparison. So the tool pretty much looks like this, okay? We begin with what the customer wants. On the left-hand side, we have a rectangle there, and we assign different ratings based on what the customer prefers. And then we start to look at how to satisfy the customer wants, right? So we look at, okay, what can we provide to meet these wants? And so we create a relationship matrix here where we match, well, for want number one, maybe a particular option will be able to do that, right? Then we have the various components there. I'm going to show the actual, there's an example in the textbook. It speaks about developing a digital camera, right? And so the first step is to develop the house of quality. And so to do that, right, maybe the customer wants it to be lightweight, easy to use. They want it to be reliable, which is the most important thing. That's why they get a rating of 5, easy to hold, and high resolution. That's what the customer wants in a camera, right? And so they house, right? So again, the features, the various options that we can deliver, right? How to satisfy the customer wants is maybe low electricity requirements, aluminum components. The camera needs to have autofocus, auto exposure, right? Number of pixels must be high, and the design must be ergonomically made, right? And so we take and we start to put a relationship matrix, okay? And in the relationship matrix, we say, let me move a little bit in front of the line here. Let me jump to the actual, maybe easier to navigate this here. Okay. So this portion here is what the customer wants. Okay. When I zoom, I cannot use my laser for some reason. Are you guys able to see my cursor?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have lightweight, easy to use, reliable. This is what the customer wants, right? And the ratings. And on the top here, we have how we can meet that want, right? What it is that we can do, right, to meet the wants of the customer. So we, in the matrix here, we assign a dot, right? That has a rating. The circle has another rating, okay? So whether we can meet it with a low or high way, then we can do that. Okay. So pretty much the high rate relationship, medium relationship, or low relationship there, right? We can assign that in the matrix here. And so that gives us the ability then to calculate our importance rating, right? So we're saying 1 times 3, 1 times 4, which is based on the customer rating here, right? And I think this was 3 times, let's see, 3, 4, 7, and then 3 times 5, 15. That gives us 22, right? That is the rating or our importance rating for this particular requirement that we have here, which is low electricity requirement, right? Now, at the top, and this is why it's called a house of quality, because we put like a roof here, right? This triangle, which basically we're linking how this low electricity requirement, in this case, is related to autofocus, right? This low electricity requirement is related with auto exposure. Okay, if you follow the line here, right, and then you follow where the dot is and you come down, you notice that it's related to auto exposure. It's also related to high number of pixels, right? So this is what it's, this top part of the house, right, or the roof is talking about a relationship between what we can do, right, the various components that we can have in our design. Okay, and I was mentioning, right, we also do the analysis for how the competitors are doing, right? So we have, in this case, company A is good because they're lightweight, they're good in easy to use, but they're fair in reliability, they're good and easy to hold, and they're poor in color correction, right? So we notice, of course, reliability is what the customer wants the most, right? That's the highest preference. Company A is fair at that. Company B is good at reliability, right? So that's the comparison there. Then we have the target values or technical attributes, 0.5 amps for the low electricity requirement, 75% for aluminum components, to infinity for the autofocus, right? 2 circuits for the auto exposure, failure 1 per 10,000 for the number of pixels, and the economic design panel ranking, right? So these are the technical aspects of that design, and we're able to then evaluate ourselves in comparison to the competition, right? So maybe we have, which one is ours here? Wait, just go down a little bit. That didn't mention which one we are. Okay, so the bottom one is our one. Okay, so we have company A, company B, and then our one here, right? So we notice that for this one, we are at 0.5, company A is 0.7, the other one is 0.6. For this one, we're at 75%, there's a 60, 50. We're all able to do autofocus, right? It requires 2 circuits to do auto exposure. We have 2 circuits, company B has 2 circuits. Failure 1 per 10,000, we're all okay there, right? Panel ranking, right? Company A is good, the other one is fair, and we are also good. So it gives us an idea of then whether we can meet the expectations of the customer, right? Or what the customer wants. And so because we're able to do that, then we can make the determination that we are going to go ahead and develop that product, okay? And manufacture the product. Now, that same thing applies when we're looking at what the customers expect, right? The different types of products that they want. And so we can look at various components or various parts that are needed. I know it's a little bit complicated. Trust me, you will not be required to create a house of quality for this class, right? That's more of a higher class where you will be doing something like this, but not for this particular introduction to operations and supply chain management. But it's good to know some of the tools that exist. Of course, there is software out there that does this diagram for you. You just need to specify these ones, and you specify the house, and then you start to just click the different matrices to show the relationship between those. Now let's look at then, once you are going to develop a product or a service, what approaches organizations can take, right? When it comes to, okay, organizing themselves to create a product or develop a service. Now, the most common approach, right, is the traditional approach, right? Where basically everybody has a responsibility based on the functional area that they work with. So you have, for example, their R&D department, they are responsible for doing the research and the development. You have the designers to work on the design aspect of it. And you have other people responsible for different things. So that's the traditional approach to when it comes to developing products and services. Now, another approach could be, right, taking the project management approach where you have someone championing the project and they're responsible for everything about the development of this product, and they bring together, right, people from different areas to participate in this particular approach, in the development of a product or service. Or it could be that you create, just like we mentioned in one of the project management organizations, right? We have a matrix organization, more of a permanent type of organization, where you have cross-functional areas or people from different functional areas working together toward the development of a product or service, right? And so you bring them together as development teams, you bring them together as manufacturing teams, and they come together to pretty much come up with products and services. Now, when it comes to development of products, most companies that bring successful products to the market, they have had a high level of failure, right? And so they must be comfortable, right, in taking the risk of failure, because from hundreds of prototypes, hundreds of products that have been conceptualized, developed, and introduced to the market, maybe one or two will be successful. So there's nothing wrong in failure. It's, remember, we're looking at what organizations do to try to bring products and services to the market, and in taking different things into consideration, right? Taking consumer wants, taking the demand in the market, the economy, different factors, right? Those things, then they can take that into consideration and then start to introduce these products. Or it could be the Japanese way. The Japanese way is pretty much everybody in the organization is involved in product development, in trying to bring new products to the market, right? That's also another approach that can be taken, right? To bring products to the market, right? Or to develop products. We have also, right? It could be using product development teams, right? Where the market requirements, right, are essential to be successful, right? And so you have these teams participate openly in terms of, okay, what does the vendor have that they can provide for us to develop a particular product okay? What type of research we can do in conjunction with our suppliers to see what we can bring to the market, right? That's one way to do it as well. Or it could be a concurrent engineering where, okay, we bring the consumer as well, right, into the discussion to see what they want, right? What are the requirements? Are they willing to continue purchasing a particular product, right? Or while at the same time, while they are conceptualizing, then they're bringing to the market and then getting feedback from the customer and feeding that feedback to the development process and then bringing iterations of the product with improvements and so forth. It kind of touches a little bit on agile development, right? More like agile is for software development, but we can incorporate it here where you are introducing something to the market, you get feedback from the market, and then you make some adaptations, and then you reintroduce it with these new features and so forth. Right? The idea is to bring stuff or products faster to the market, right? And we don't have to wait until a whole design process or need to have all the features to bring a product to the market. No, you bring the product with minimum features, and then you get feedback from the consumer about maybe something else that they would want to see in the product. And by doing that, then you have improvements of the product and you're able to manufacture correctly, right? Of course, in looking at the way products are manufactured, right, you have to look at maybe how can you improve, right? We were mentioning earlier the manufacturing process of the Tesla, right? So there's an example I found in an old textbook, which I like because it's pretty simple to understand the concept here, right? And in this case, we're looking at the value engineering and how we can reduce costs, right? In this case, you notice that we have a product, right? Its design, its function, right? I mean, it's functional, it works, but it has several bolts and fasteners and stuff like that to basically have this spindle here, right? So this is the original design, it has so many parts to it, right? Then it's redesigned, right? Or the design is revised and it's casted as one part here, and then you have the other piece here, which is this rod, and then just these fasteners and just snaps in there, right? But it can be further redesigned, right? And the final design, you basically have to have a push and snap assembly, right? Which is basically this casted big piece, and then just this rod just snaps in place here, and that's it, right? Thinking about operations, thinking about production, right? If you have an assembly like this, you can see where you have improved, right? The manufacturability, the productivity of this product, right? Or the assembly of the product from having so many fasteners, which of course, when we touched into quality management, we can see where maybe losing a fastener or losing a bolt or something can cause issues, right? Where that can be improved with the final design there. Okay. With that said, I'm going to bring today's session to an end. I want to thank you for joining tonight's session. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. If you have any comments or concerns.